Back in 2019, InWin released the A1, which quickly became a pretty popular, larger format mini ITX case, and now InWin has grown the A series of gaming cases with the ATX A5 case and the Micro-ATX A3, which is the model we're going to check out today. Does it meet the standards set by its little sibling? Let's find out. When I'm doing tedious work like hours of benchmarking, I like to catch up on my reading list, and I'm able to do that with Audible Plus. Audible Plus offers access to thousands of best-selling audiobooks, Audible originals, and even podcasts. As an Audible Premium Plus member, this month I selected Star Wars: Thrawn Ascendancy by Timothy Zahn as one of my 2 monthly free bonus titles to keep. For more information about Audible Plus or to get your free trial, click the link in the description below. Hey guys, welcome to Elevated Systems. I'm your host CJ, and this is the InWin A3. This Micro-ATX case, along with its bigger sibling, the A5, was released several months ago in the European and Asian markets, and now they're available here in North America. I've reviewed a lot of really good Micro-ATX cases this year, so the competition is strong in this space, so we're gonna find out where the A3 fits into the field. I've actually been using this case for a while now. I've built a couple of different systems in it, and it's currently housing my brand new next-gen case standardized case review gaming system. We'll get more into that in a bit, but first let's go through the specs and features, show you what you can and can fit in the case. We'll do some thermal testing. I'll take you through my build notes, including the pros and cons, and we'll finish up with my overall conclusion on the value of the InWin A3. Starting with the specs and features, the A3 measures 401 millimeters deep by 215 millimeters wide by 347 millimeters tall. The case is compatible with mini ITX and Micro-ATX motherboards, can accommodate CPU coolers up to 162 millimeters, graphics cards up to 340 millimeters, and ATX power supplies between 140 and 200 millimeters long. However, a PSU longer than 170 millimeters will reduce the maximum graphics card length to 280 millimeters. The case comes with just one rear-mounted 120 millimeter fan, but can accommodate two 120 millimeter bottom-mounted fans and two 120 top-mounted fans. Additionally, up to a 240 millimeter radiator or AIO can be top-mounted. There's several millimeters of space behind the motherboard tray for cable management, as well as a mounting point for two 2.5-inch SSDs or one SSD and one hard drive. Additionally, there's a mounting point for an SSD or hard drive on the bottom of the case. The front I/O includes a 20 gigabit Type-C port, two 5 gigabit Type-A ports, a 3.5 millimeter headset jack, and the power button. The rear of the case includes 4 bridged PCIe expansion ports. The bottom 2 are the break-off type. Both the left tempered glass and right steel panels feature toolless removal, and while they do easily pop off, they're also firmly attached so they won't just fall off. The front panel is solid steel, and the case has a stovepipe or bottom-up ventilation design with a bottom filter. The top panel is a plastic and mesh lattice design and can also be easily removed. To test this case, I'm using some brand new next-gen components. It's a gaming PC using a Ryzen 5 7600X and an RX 6750 XT, 32 gigs of DDR5 memory, a Samsung 980 Pro Gen 4 SSD on an MSI B650 motherboard. So let's review my build notes, and as always, I'll start where I started the build, the power supply installation. The A3 has a front-mounted PSU, and due to the solid front panel, can only be mounted in one direction. The PSU fit with no issues. I didn't even have to remove the internal side panel. The 90-degree power extension cable did fit, but barely. This is power supply dependent, of course. The included adjustable bracket did a good job of stabilizing the PSU. Now, I mentioned that the case only comes with one Mercury 120mm fan. However, InWin didn't send over 3 more of the Mercury fans, so I did use those in this build, 2 on the bottom and 1 on the top. However, you do want to install the motherboard and plug everything in before installing the fans because they will get in the way. Without the fans, there was plenty of room above and below the motherboard to work and to plug everything in. No slicing of knuckles trying to plug in EPS cables. And if you go with a top-mounted AIO, there's plenty of space and you won't have any RAM clearance issues. The 2¼ slot 335mm long Red Devil graphics card fit in the case. I did remove the interior panel to install it, and because the first PCIe slot on the motherboard is used by the NVMe SSD, the graphics card had to be installed in the second and third slot, which brought it to within a centimeter of the fans. However, I still had enough room to install the included GPU support bracket. There's plenty of room for cable management, however, not a lot of tie down points, and to be honest, I was a lot less meticulous than I usually am. I just tucked the cables in and did my best to keep them out of the large opening in the front side of the case, and even with just one zip tie used, the rear panel snapped right on with no clearance issues. The 155mm tall Scythe Mugen 5 cooler had no clearance issues either. Overall, the build went together with no major problems. However, it wasn't perfect. There are a couple of minor needs improvement, but before we get into the pros and cons, let's talk thermals. The baseline temps recorded with the system on an open air test bench include a CPU and VRM temps of 70.7 degrees and 22.3 degrees above ambient after an average of 3 20-minute 8-64 stress tests. The GPU temp after looping Port Royal for 20 minutes reached a max of 47 degrees Celsius above ambient. Inside the A3, the CPU temps rose by just under 2 degrees, while the VRM temps fell by almost 4 degrees. And with the two case fans blowing directly into the GPU, the temps fell by a full degree. So while the large graphics card may be partially restricting the bottom-up airflow, overall temps in the case were better than I expected them to be. Now, I mentioned there were some needs improvements for the case, but before I get into that, let's look at the strong points. First, the overall build quality is very good. The case is built from a relatively thick gauge steel and is very sturdy, even with all the exterior panels removed. The toolless side panels are nice. Accessing the inside of the PC is very easy. The pegs are plastic, so I do have some concerns with their durability over time, but I've installed and removed these panels a couple of dozen times at this point with no problems. The top panel is also plastic, however, it doesn't scream cheap. In fact, the vent pattern and the mesh complement the case well. The front panel is essentially a taller version of the A1 design. However, I do like the use of the InWin logo as opposed to the text used on the A1. I also like the matching rounded edge rear panel. Very clean and mostly solid with just the various cutouts where they need to be. Like I mentioned, for a Micro-ATX case, there is plenty of space for larger components. Fit and finish is great, as we've come to expect from InWin. I've been building in InWin chassis since the 90s with the A500, and they've always been pretty solid cases, with a few exceptions. As far as weak points, first, to install the rearmost bottom fan, you need to remove the plastic case foot, which is okay, except to access the screw, you need to remove the rubber foot insert, which is difficult to do without damaging it. While I'm on the fans, these Mercury fans are daisy chainable. However, the connections are only a centimeter or so from the fan frame, which means you end up with a bunch of extra cables and connectors inside the case, rather than being able to route them behind the motherboard and manage them with all the rest of the cables. Which leads to cable management. There's plenty of room for cables. I even fit a couple of PCIe extension cables in this build, but there are no tie down points back there, nowhere to secure cables with straps or zip ties. I'm also not a fan of the breakaway PCIe covers. I know they offer some cost savings to the manufacturer. However, once you get past the $50 to $70 price point, all 4 replaceable PCIe slot covers isn't too much to ask for. And my final nitpicky observation is, while there's plenty of room for 2 SSDs to mount to both the larger rear plate and on the bottom of the case, there's only mounting holes for 1 in each spot. That's just a missed opportunity for more storage. However, despite me being nitpicky as usual, I do think the pros of this case greatly outweigh the cons, and at $100, it's a great value and earns a place with the really good Micro-ATX cases released this year. For current pricing or more info on the InWin A3, be sure to check the links in the description below. If you have any questions, ask in the comments. While you're there, be sure to hit that like and maybe consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.